You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FI. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FI instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of Freedom Before FI. I hope things are going well for you. If not, don't worry, that's just life's way of giving us some learning opportunities, also known as the University of Life. Anyway, I'm really excited to talk about today's episode because it's about ways to find freedom on your journey to FI or financial independence, and especially if you can't stand your job anymore, your job. As it says on the tin, this podcast is about finding freedom before FI. So finding ways to improve your lifestyle now instead of waiting for retirement. So this is really the crux and the core of this podcast. One key thing to remember is that the more you progress on your FI journey, i.e. the more that you save and invest, then naturally the more options and opportunities for freedom you start to see around you. So for example, you may have built a bigger emergency fund, a bigger FU stash, maybe you reached one of the semi-retirement milestones like Coast FI or Barista FIRE. So the question we'll be answering today is what options are there for us, especially when we really need it, like if we want to quit our stressful jobs, for example. Don't worry, I got you, and this is how I'll break it down for you today. So I've divvied up the options into 3 separate groups, which, my friend, are as follows. So the first one is options where you're still working full time. The second one is options where you're partially working. And then the third one is options where you don't need to work at all. All right, then, let's jump into the first batch, which is the options where you're still working full time. So the options where you're still working fully, whether that's by necessity or just preference, range from staying in your current company, which I'll explain more about since I can already hear the moans, to doing something completely different. So sometimes our predicaments might just need a slight tweak instead of a massive overhaul. For example, you might be in a situation where you don't need to quit your job outright, but you can take some minor pivots to make it a bit better for you. So let's look at these minor pivots, shall we? So if working hours are an issue, you could, for example, negotiate more flexibility, i.e. working different hours that work better for you and for your family. If the work location is a problem, you could, for example, negotiate to work from home, or to just come into the office once or twice a week. Perhaps you don't like your current tasks. You could try out another role in the same company or request to work on different projects. If you have toxic work colleagues, could you transfer to another department or to a different team? So from my experience, I had quite a big request. I asked if I could transfer to an office branch overseas. If you're new to the show, I moved from the UK to the Philippines. Okay, so moving from minor pivots to more intermediate level pivots, perhaps you simply just need to find a better job, like a similar role but a different company. Basically, a job that ticks more of your pros instead of your cons. So for example, maybe the projects that another company work on are more meaningful to you, or maybe they just have better perks. Perhaps you prefer the culture there, or maybe they have more flexible working arrangements, or maybe another company has a better office location for you. Earlier in my career, I made a move partly based on location. You see, I moved from a company that was in a bustling city of inner London to a company based outside of London and more quiet and provincial. It was great because I didn't have to commute on a packed train for over an hour. Instead, I was driving like 20 to 30 minutes away from the city through like fields and fresh air. The awesome thing was I used to drive against all the traffic. I'd pass all the cars going into London whilst I'll be driving the opposite way, listening to my chill hip-hop tunes with no traffic. All right, let's look at some big pivot moves. So options that sit under a big pivot could be doing a complete career change, or secondly, building what's called a portfolio career. Okay, let's quickly talk about the career change. Of course, this is for those who want something completely new. Maybe they're falling out of love with their profession, their career, or the industry they're in. Of course, you might need to do some retraining for the new role, but if you've been in your old career for quite some time, chances are you've built a lot of transferable skills and contacts which you can build on and leverage. Okay, so the second thing I mentioned was the portfolio career, which is a very interesting option. This is basically combining multiple side gigs or multiple jobs into a portfolio of jobs. For example, you can be doing freelance digital marketing for 2 to 3 days a week, then teaching a language, doing coaching, or even volunteering on your other days. You can really mix and match different jobs to what works best for you. So I suggest focusing on your strengths, what you enjoy doing, or working on things you want to learn more about. If you think this episode would help a friend, please don't hesitate to share it with them. The show notes can be found at freedombeforefi.substack.com. If you have a question or want to connect, feel free to send me an email at freedombeforefi@proton.me. That's freedombeforefi@proton.me. If you found this show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can follow us on Spotify or Apple via the show's main page or on whatever app you're using right now. And lastly, if you've just learned one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out here, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. If you're using Apple Podcasts, you can even leave a nice review by scrolling to the bottom of the podcast page. That would help us out loads. Alright, so that wraps up part 1. On the next episode, I'll be talking about the 2 other groups, which is options where you're partially working, and then the third one is options where you don't need to work at all. Alright, I'll see you on the next one.